10 years. That's 650 mornings, 650 chances to make a different choice. And yet, for most people, the next decade looks a lot like the last one. Not because they lack potential, but because they've stopped asking different questions. We talk a lot about goals, about outcomes, about where we want to be. But rarely do we pause long enough to ask, who am I becoming in the process? Not what am I achieving? Who am I becoming? That's where everything begins. There's a kind of quiet dread that sneaks in when you realize you're busy every day but not moving toward anything meaningful. You're doing things, sure, earning, managing, planning, but underneath it all is a feeling, a soft ache, that maybe you've been aiming in the wrong direction. The first step to fixing your next 10 years is to stop pretending that busyness equals purpose. You can spend a decade climbing a ladder and find it leaned against the wrong wall. So the real question becomes, what are you building, and will it matter 10 years from now? I once sat with a man in his 60s who built a company from nothing. He had the house, the cars, the lifestyle people admire. But as we talked, he said something I'll never forget. He looked me in the eye and said, I didn't build my life. I built my image, and now I don't know the man underneath it. That's what can happen when you don't stop to think. When you move from one milestone to the next without checking in with yourself, you don't just lose time, you lose alignment. And when you lose alignment, it doesn't matter how fast you're going. You're still lost. So let's stop and ask a better question. What does a meaningful life look like a decade from now? Not in terms of stuff, not achievements, but in terms of peace, presence, integrity. What does it look like to build a life you actually want to live? If you're in your 20s or 30s, 10 years feels far away. If you're in your 40s or 50s, it feels like it's catching up fast. But wherever you are, the next decade is already being shaped by the habits you're keeping, the thoughts you're nurturing, and the people you're choosing to become. And here's the thing. Most people think their future will be built on a few big decisions. Career moves, big breaks, one defining moment, but it's not. It's shaped by what you do when nobody's watching. It's built in the dark, not in the spotlight. The problem is, we often make decisions to protect our comfort instead of protect our potential. We choose safety over stretch, approval over authenticity, and in doing so, we build a future that might look good on paper, but feels hollow to live in. If you want to fix your next 10 years, don't start with a plan. Start with a mirror. Ask yourself, where am I lying to myself? What truths have I been avoiding because they'd require me to change? Because growth doesn't begin with ambition. It begins with honesty. You can't fix the future if you're still protecting the habits that broke your past. You can't evolve if you're still defending the choices that kept you stuck. The hard truth is, most people aren't stuck because they don't know what to do. They're stuck because they don't want to feel what it will take to do it. So if your life feels off track, don't just change the surface. Change the root. That quiet thing beneath your actions that drives all your decisions. Your beliefs, your fears, your self-concept. Who do you believe you are? And who would you be if you let that go? I knew someone who used to say, I'm just not the type of person who finishes things. That belief showed up everywhere. Projects, relationships, commitments. Until one day he asked himself, what if that's not a personality trait, but a decision I've made so many times it became an identity? That question changed his life. Because once you realize your story is editable, you stop accepting limitations as facts. And maybe that's the shift that changes everything. Not motivation, not hustle, but identity. The moment you decide, I'm the kind of person who follows through, who builds something that matters, who lives intentionally, even when no one's watching. The next 10 years will be shaped by who you choose to be when it's hard, when it's lonely, when progress feels invisible. That's where the future is born, in those quiet, stubborn decisions to stay aligned with who you want to become. And let's be honest, Not everyone will understand. Not everyone will applaud your efforts to grow. Some will question it. Some will mock it. Some will feel threatened by it. But that's okay. You're not building their future. You're building yours. Fixing your next 10 years doesn't mean having all the answers. It means asking better questions. What would a day look like if you designed it around what truly matters? What kind of relationships would you have if you stopped performing and started connecting? What kind of work would you do if you stopped chasing status and started creating value? You might not be able to overhaul everything overnight, but you can change direction, and direction always matters more than speed. A small degree of change, if sustained, will take you to a different destination. One honest conversation can change your trajectory. One choice to stay when you want to run. One act of courage when you usually play small. That's how the future gets rewritten. Not with dramatic reinvention, but with consistent alignment. So if you feel behind, start anyway. If you feel unclear, get quiet. If you feel overwhelmed, simplify. Because clarity doesn't arrive when everything is perfect. It shows up when you make room for it, when you stop numbing and start noticing, when you stop pretending and start telling the truth. The next 10 years aren't guaranteed, but they are yours to shape, and they'll be shaped by what you choose today, even if it's one small thing, even if it's barely noticeable, because that's how everything begins, with the decision to no longer be who you were. And the quiet commitment to become someone you're proud of becoming,